This weekend, the MCU finally returned with Black Widow, a movie people have been asking for about a decade now, and it's finally come to fruition after over a year of delays. This film takes place in between Captain America Civil War, takes place pretty much right after Civil War, and revolves around Black Widow being on the run from General Ross from Civil War and Incredible Hulk. And she ends up meeting up with her family to take down the Red Room, which we briefly saw in Avengers Age of Ultron, which is apparently still going strong, creating more Black Widows like her. So, the thing about this film is, for one thing I want to talk about is the timing of this film. Because people have been asking for this film for years. And people have been saying since this movie was announced, like, oh, it's too late for a Black Widow movie, especially after she died in Avengers Age of Ultron, or Endgame. Everybody's been, oh, it's too late for a Black Widow movie, why is this coming so late? No, nobody's gonna go watch this, and yet this is already making a shitload of money, for one. And two, I don't think there was better timing for this, because had this come out around 2011-ish, when she was first introduced in Iron Man 2 back in 2010. So had this movie come out somewhere around the time of the first Avengers movie, I don't think it would have been as well received as it is. I think it would have just been viewed as another average Marvel movie. But the timing of this film was much better than it would have been had it come out in Phase 1 or 2. I think kicking off Phase 4 was the better option. So, something I will say that for this film, you don't have to have watched the shows for this movie, because the movie was supposed to come out last year, and the shows came out on time. Actually, I think WandaVision came out early, but, so, this film came out late, so, there is one character who shows up in this film from one of the shows, but, again, this was supposed to come out before, so it really doesn't matter, and I'll get to that in a bit. So, the movie, of course, opens up with her being on the run, and it opens with her backstory, basically, of her with her family. I keep putting that quotes because it's not her real family. It's her father and mother are Alexei, who is also known as the Red Guardian, played by David Harbour, and Melina, played by Rachel Weisz, and her sister Elena, played by Florence Pugh. I don't think I said that right, but it doesn't matter. So, then we get this introduction of them. Basically, they're undercover in Ohio. The two girls don't know this, but Alexei and Melina are. And then they're brought to this, military base, I guess, where Elena and Natasha are, of course, turned into Black Widows by the Red Room. And even though present-day Natasha thought she took down the Red Room years ago, as it's in Budapest. So we finally know what happened in Budapest back when it was mentioned in the first Avengers movie, because her and Clint Barton took down the Red Room. Or at least they thought they did. But now the Red Room is back and stronger than ever, as is conscripted many Black Widows throughout the world. I think there was hundreds on the list that showed up at the end, but again, I'll get to that later. So, none of the other Avengers show up in this film. And I was actually really happy about that. The one thing I did find weird is that on, everywhere you look up this movie, Google, IMDb, whatever, any of those, it all has Robert Downey Jr. on the cast list as Tony Stark. Stark never shows up. At all. Not even his picture shows up. The only Avenger that shows up it's in the form of a picture, is Clint Barton. That's it. And I'll get to that scene later. So, I thought that was really odd that I kept seeing Robert Downey Jr. on the cast list when he's not even in the film. There are, of course, many references to the other Avengers, but they never show up. So, the main character, Black Widow, is once again played by Scarlett Johansson, is still a great performance in this, but something I did find odd is that the other three family members seemed to outact Johansson in this film. Weisz, Harbour and Pugh all seem to have way more range than Johansson, which is actually really odd. And I've actually seen, like, posts and stuff that there is already, could potentially be Oscar buzz swirling around Florence Pugh as Elena. You know what? I'd be okay with that. That sounds pretty good. She did very well in that. She was probably the best actress in the movie, Vice taking a close second. And then Harbour had a really good performance as the Red Guardian, yeah. So, and the villain of the film is Taskmaster. Possibly the one thing I don't like in this film is the twist involving Taskmaster. The fights with so they kind of try to build up who Taskmaster is throughout the entire film, which makes sense. And in the comics, he's basically an assassin who has the ability to predict his opponent's moves. And in this version, I don't know if Taskmaster actually has that ability in this version, but instead he's basically like a replica of basically anyone who he's like up against. He's like a carbon copy of Black Widow. And this is represented in many fight scenes, which are actually very cool. Unfortunately, the twist of who Taskmaster is, I thought was extremely dumb. It tied into the story fine, but then don't use Taskmaster. Just use a different villain or create a villain. Don't try to rope probably one of the greatest Marvel villains into this film and then do it that dirty. Because honestly, I like Taskmaster throughout the majority of the film, the ridiculous design of the helmet notwithstanding. I still don't understand why they made that thing look like a Power Rangers mask just with teeth. But that was probably the only thing I didn't like about this film. One thing I will say is that the action at times is kind of hard to see. It's the same kind of problem Falcon and Winter Soldier also had at times, where there are a lot of close-ups, the camera gets shaky every once in a while, and sometimes you can't really see the choreography. But at least it's good choreography, even if the shots aren't very well laid out. I don't think Kate Shortland should direct the next Black Widow movie. If there's going to be another one revolving around Elena, I don't think Shortland should direct it. They should get a new director for that. They can get the writers, but they probably needed someone who can actually direct movies like this. But actually, the direction itself wasn't that bad. It was just the shot layout during the fight scenes for the majority of the time that was the problem. But those are really small gripes I have with the film. I really like how this film didn't try to be a full-out origin story for Black Widow, because then I would have said, yeah, this movie's way too late. The actual origin part of the film takes about the first 15 minutes, maybe the first 10. And we've already seen glimpses of her origin from the previous films, especially back with Age of Ultron, so we didn't need to see any of the training, because we already saw what the training kind of looked like. And they basically showed us in this film while they showed other Black Widow's training, so we get the gist of how Natasha was here too. It's basically the same thing, so they didn't have to go into all that, and I appreciate that. The story mostly revolves around her and her, I guess, adoptive family, basically, and them taking down the Red Room, and I thought that was really good. I liked Alexei in this. I liked the Red Guardian. He was a lot of fun. And his prison break scene was probably my favorite scene in the movie. It was at least one of them. Because not only was it actually a really cool fight scene, it was actually really funny at times. Alexei probably had the best lines in the movie, and so did Melina. And it's like, something this movie does is interesting is that this is a lot more serious than a lot of other Marvel movies. Marvel movies like to have their comedy to it, and that's fun. I can appreciate the full-out comedies that Marvel has. The Guardians of the Galaxy movies and the Ant-Man movies are among my favorites in the MCU, and they are just full-out comedies, and I am totally okay with that. But I do also like when the MCU can play it more seriously, much like Iron Man or Avengers Endgame. So, the Black Widow was more like Iron Man than it was, say, Ant-Man. It was way more on the serious side, but much like Iron Man, when it made jokes, most of the time it did work. And most of the jokes came from the banter between the family members, especially between Black Widow and Elena, and Alexei and Melina. That's where most of the comedy is, and and that's usually where it works. There are a couple jokes that kind of fall flat, but I don't think there's ever been a single movie that has comedy in it that doesn't have at least one or two jokes that fall flat. I don't think there's ever been a movie where every single joke hits. Even great comedies like Spaceballs or Blazing Saddles, every once in a while has a joke that isn't very funny. And so the score was pretty. Something I've seen people complain about is the music score of the Marvel movies that is just kind of drowned out in the background. I can mostly see where they're coming from on that, but the scores for Marvel movies are usually pretty good. The score for this one is too, and I do like the song choices where it has like actual songs to it, kind of like Guardians of the Galaxy, except there isn't like a long list of pop culture songs. They're not really pop culture, just like a copyrighted songs that they got for the film. There isn't like a 12 set that you can literally make an album out of like they did. There's a few in here, and they're all pretty good. I do like the songs that they chose for this film. So, I'm trying to think what else to talk about in this. The villain is fine, I get. The villain suits the film just fine. I do like kind of like the James Bond style, like, multiple plot twists, or it's not even like plot twists, it's just like semi-double crossings where it's kind of confusing to talk about because it's like I said, it's like James Bond. It's a lot of fun in it. I like when the movie kind of throws you for a loop, especially when it doesn't really give much like build up to that and it shows you when it cuts back to it. Some people could see that as cheating, and I can definitely see where they're coming from. I thought it worked here. Like, especially in the third act, when Natasha's face to face with the villain, it shows what happened while they were at the house, which kind of set everything up for the final act. The final battle for this was really good. I liked the fight between Red Guardian and Taskmaster. I liked the fight between Natasha and all the Black Widows. I liked the scenes where they were like falling off of the Red Room as it was exploding, which you see a lot of in the trailer. It was actually a really cool fight. It didn't last that long, but it was still pretty cool. Those are the times where the shots actually stand out, because you can't get too many close-ups while they're like parachuting everywhere, jumping off of falling debris, because if you can't make that look good, you might as well give up. It was like the scene in the last episode of Season 7 of the Clone Wars, but I thought this one was a bit better because there was a bit more tension around it. Because with Clone Wars, you knew Ahsoka was going to live, you knew Rex was going to live. Even in this one, you know that Natasha's going to live. You don't know if the others are. I didn't know if Melina or Alexei was going to die. I didn't even know if Elena was. I had a feeling she was going to live and she was going to become the next Black Widow, which I think is what they're setting up for the next, in the end credits scene, where, even though, I'm going to talk about the end credits scene for a second, where I have a feeling this is just setting up the Hawkeye show, where the entire plot is her going after Clint Barton, and I guess Kate Bishop as well, since she's going to be working with Hawkeye, and by the end of it, she's probably going to become the new Black Widow. That's going to be my guess, and I would probably say it's a pretty safe guess there, so I'm sticking with that theory, that's what's going to happen. She's going to become the new Black Widow at the end of the Hawkeye show. Now, honestly, I'm okay with that. I like the actress. She did a very good job in this film, and if she does get an Oscar nod, I would totally be behind it. I really would. This film was a really great film. Thankfully, the MCU finally has returned, and we're getting 3 more this year, and we're getting 4 next year as well. I'm glad that the MCU's return wasn't a complete failure. It was actually a very good return to form. If you see this movie as too safe, I can kind of see where you're coming from, but after the long hiatus, even though this wasn't planned to be a long hiatus, even still, it was going to be the longest gap between MCU films since 2011. So, or maybe 2013, something like that. It was going to be the longest gap in a while. So I can see why a safe film would probably be your best bet here. And even still, it's a very good safe film. I've seen safe films that really suck because they play it too safe. But something like Superman Returns, they tried to play it way too safe, ended up being a boring schlock. This film was not boring, it was not schlock, it was actually a very good film that I would highly recommend you check out. If you're a fan of the MCU, you've probably already seen it. It's making a shitload of money, it's already breaking the last 2 years of a record, it's already passed, including the Disney Plus subscriptions, it's made over $215 million in its opening weekend alone, based off international release, domestic release, and what the hell is that? And Disney Plus. So, yeah, this is already shaping up to be a good year for Marvel. I'm giving Black Widow a 4.75 out of 5. Thank you all so much for watching. Be sure to hit that like button for more reviews. Hit the subscribe button for more reviews like this. Comment down below what you thought of Black Widow, and what is your favorite MCU film up to date. My favorite, personally, is Avengers Endgame. This film probably goes in the middle, but we'll see when I get to an MCU ranking soon. So, that's all I got for Black Widow, and I'll see you all next time. Bye.